another important passing now, and it's the business sector this time that's mourning the passing of South African retail giant Raymond Ackerman. Pick n Pay announced the passing of its founder earlier in the week, and Ackerman died at the age of 92, having contributed immensely to the business sector in South Africa and beyond. Many businesses say Ackerman's legacy will continue to inspire and guide them for many years to come. Let's reflect on this now. We're joined by Cosatu's parliamentary coordinator Mtho and advocate Mtho, who is the president of the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry. A very good afternoon to you both, and thank you very much for joining us. Advocate Xulu, I'm going to start with you here. A reflection on the contribution that was made to business in South Africa, corporate South Africa, if you will, when it comes to navigating what has become a particularly difficult environment in South Africa. What would you say the legacy that's been left by Raymond Ackerman in this regard is?
Good afternoon, Mtho and the viewers. No, I think Mr. Ackerman, and we reiterate our message of condolences to the Ackerman family and the Pick n Pay ecosystem. The legacy that he leaves is a legacy that I think is the gold standard of business leadership. You know that he took over a small business and turned it into a household name in South Africa, and in the process led blazed the trail in terms of entrepreneurship, the influence of business on public policy, and obviously the conditions of workers and the prominence of the South African economy globally. So he is actually the embodiment of a business leadership that is able to take a homegrown solution and make it internationally competitive, but in the process also be able to shape policy and affect the lives of stakeholders while also taking care of the interests of the business. So indeed, he leaves a great and inspiring legacy, a legacy that as business leaders we need to emulate and obviously take forward in the current circumstances.
An inspiring legacy, Mtho, but what would you say his relationship with the unions was? Because you would find a lot with, in instances with corporate South Africa and the unions, there's a lot of clashing that happens. But would you say that he respected that the role of the unions in advancing labor laws throughout business in South Africa?
Yeah, good afternoon. Thanks for having us. So look, I think first things first is that obviously we do offer our condolences and our best wishes and our sympathies to his family, to his friends, and to his loved ones. Obviously, losing anybody is always a difficult moment, even if the person is elderly, but still it's always a difficult and painful chapter in that family's life, so wish them the best and all the strength. I think from our side, having talked to our colleagues in Sakawa, which organizes at Pick n Pay, several things came out which are quite unique. And obviously the relationship between unions and employees is not always the easiest and the most smooth of relationships. At times there will be heated disagreements and arguments, but that's part of the labor relations regime. That's why you have unions and employees, to see how can you resolve the issues in a way which is positive, which benefits all parties. Because ultimately we all need each other to succeed. I think for us, two positive things about the late Mr. Ackerman. One is that at the height of apartheid in the 1960s, when black people were honestly treated a little better than slaves, in the most appalling, inhumane conditions, that at least he was one of the few businessmen who had the decency, humanity, the foresight and the progressive kind of vision to say, actually, black people shouldn't be subjugated only to menial jobs. They should be allowed to reach their full potential like any other human being, allowed to become managers, be promoted, be trained and invested in and so forth, treated like human beings, in other words. So that was an unusual thing. Obviously today that's common sense, but at that time in the dark days of apartheid, it was a unique and a positive contribution from his part. I think also that he recognized the role of trade unions, and I think he viewed them as a partner to engage with. So I think that's also quite positive, because trade unions want the workplace, the company in this instance, to do well, so the members, the workers can be paid, so the jobs can be secured and that more jobs can be created. So I think the fact that he viewed the trade unions as a partner was a positive instance, because you do find some employers who actually view trade unions as an enemy to be crushed and to be liquidated, etc. So I think for us, as a positive thing that many other businesses could learn from, how to treat employees as a partner, as an asset to be invested in, to be respected and to be treated decently. And of course, to view workers and trade unions as partners to help grow the economy, to grow the business in this instance, and really to be partners in a journey together. I think that's a positive thing, because you have seen, for example, last year, one mining company where they wanted to fight with mine workers for an extra 150 Rand a month. So I think in this instance, it's a positive example that other businesses should also learn from.
So a legacy was created, Advocate Xulu, by the entrepreneur, but he also had a conducive environment in which to grow his business. So one wonders, is that environment still existing today to create another Richard Ackerman, a YT Basson, a Richard Maponya? Is there an environment that is conducive for that now in the current South Africa, or does all that richness of doing business in SA pass on with these stalwarts of business, if you will?
Look, it's every conducive environment will always be dictated by the times and the laws of the day. I think what we need to focus on is to mirror how we started and how we traversed and where we are now. We are concerned that we are not placing sufficient support on entrepreneurship. So if you can draw parallels to the fact that he was able to acquire 4 stores and grow them in a hostile environment, in this current day and age, there isn't sufficient support for private equity, mechanism to support entrepreneurs. The current framework for SME development is totally uncoordinated, and what government is doing and the private sector is doing is not always aligned. So we are concerned that we have not necessarily placed sufficient support on entrepreneurship to really say it's sufficiently conducive for anyone coming up in this economy to build a business as large as Pick n Pay has been able to do. I think the other thing that we still need to reform is the level of entrepreneurship and how much influence they have on policy that drives the economic space. We do have organized business and organized labor and organized government, but as it came out this year from the net reflections, we still have to crowd in more voices. Mr. Ackerman was able to drive and influence policy that was beneficial for his stakeholders in Pick n Pay, and currently we don't have a lot of entrepreneurs really being given the space to voice out a lot of their inputs. And also I think we're still very backward in terms of driving innovation. Mr. Ackerman benchmarked his business with international standards. In South Africa currently, we don't really hone the skills and the ability to innovate and to grow homegrown businesses. So the way he was able to come up, he actually develop his own path. And I think in the democratic South Africa, we need to be able to have systems in place to unlock that entrepreneurship, the influence of entrepreneurs on public policy, and be able to drive innovation. We are not there yet as now, but I think we have at least the opportunity to conversate. And I think we should learn from this legacy and see how we can develop other entrepreneurs, because he may be able to do it by himself. But a lot of entrepreneurs in South Africa are generally still out of the influence of the direction of economic policy.
And Mtho, those that are also out of that direction of South Africa's economic policy is those who are looking for jobs. The majority of South Africans are young and unemployed at the moment. And I wonder if business is still creating or has the appetite to create an environment that creates jobs, or it's a focus on a move to technology and robotics and the like. Do you find that the business in South Africa still has an appetite to employ and develop certain skills, or has there been a significant shift towards efficiency, cutting costs, and unfortunately the receivers of those initiatives are young people in the moment? I mean, Pick n Pay was criticized a few years ago for implementing self-service checkout points instead of employing people at those the tills, for example, the tellers, for example. So your thoughts on that particular component?
Look, it's a mixed bag. You have some employees who are quite progressive, who work with trade unions, for example, in the different master plans. So, for example, in the clothing and textile master plan, there's been a common commitment by all the big retailers in that sector to increase locally produced clothing from 40% of the goods they sell on the stores to 60%. So that's quite positive because it helps to create local jobs. And we found at times when we've engaged some of the retailers in the supermarkets, for example, around stocking locally produced sugar or poultry, there's an appetite. Of course, much more needs to be done. But we've also found that at times, many other business leaders don't have the same level of foresight or vision, etc. And there is a need to have a very frank discussion. Number one, our crisis as a country is the issue of unemployment. We can't sustain a society where we have 42% unemployment. And for young people, it's 60%. That's a ticking time bomb. Business won't be able to survive unless we reduce unemployment. It's a ticking time bomb that one day is going to explode and destroy everything, as we've seen in other countries. But there's also a need to have a much more humane approach, a decent approach around the apartheid wage gap, which is still quite predominant, even in the retail sector, but also especially in the mining, the banking sector, and so forth. You have, for example, some CEOs of retail companies or mining companies or banks earning in a single day what their cashier would not even earn in 2 years. You have bank CEOs who earn 150,000 Rand every single day of the year, and yet the cashiers will never be able to earn that kind of a wage. We need to have a much better approach, because how are we going to sell the goods to workers if they can't afford to buy them? It doesn't make sense. We do have many companies where the employees simply ignore the labor laws. They choose to circumvent them by outsourcing the employees to labor brokers, etc., as a way of kind of ignoring it. And if you really want to be a productive company, you should be investing in your workers, respecting them, treating them like a valued partner in the business. If you treat them like slaves, of course, how will they be productive or be highly motivated? We think also there is a real need to have much more focus on local content. Businesses should be much more embracing the call for locally produced goods, and saying as a retail sector or as a mining company or whatever, that they should really prioritize and champion locally produced goods, because that's going to give solidarity to other companies which are struggling. And of course, if everybody does well in the economy, then we'll all benefit as well. You can't be benefiting if other parties are suffering and stagnating.
That's an important point for us to pick up on at another time, Advocate Xulu. But unfortunately, that is all the time we have for this discussion. That is Cosatu's Parliamentary Coordinator, Mtho, and Advocate Mtho Xulu, who is the President of the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry, reflecting on the legacy created by Raymond Ackerman and, of course, what he's left for business in South Africa today to take forward into the future.